Breaking news. Ukraine has just destroyed a $100 million Russian Nebo-SVU radar. It is confirmed today, January 30th, 2026, a massive blow to Russian air defense has just been delivered. A strategic eye in the sky, well, has been blinded, and the implications are absolutely massive. But before we get into the details of this strike, I have one request for you. Please subscribe to Defense Reports. It's your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. It really helps us out. I'm Alex. Join me with Oscar in the latest deep dive by Defense Report for a sharp, no-nonsense breakdown of the latest in global defense news, military technology, and strategic developments. And today, we're going to cover exactly how Ukraine is systematically dismantling the Russian war machine's ability to see. Now, I'm not just talking about blowing up a truck here. We are talking about a calculated strategy that's leaving billions of dollars of Russian hardware just, smoking in fields and leaving their oil refineries completely defenseless.
It's good to be here. And honestly, the reports we have on the desk today from the General Staff and the SBU, they're painting a picture of a very, very sophisticated operation. This isn't just about the Nebo-SVU radar that was hit today.
Yeah.
This is about a broader corridor strategy that is fundamentally changing the entire geometry of the battlefield.
That's the part that really grabbed me. You look at the headline, you see $100 million radar destroyed. And okay, that's a big number.
It is.
But then you dig into these SBU reports, and they're talking about a campaign that has already wiped out $4 billion in assets. $4 billion. We're going to unpack that, explain why this specific radar is called the stealth killer, or at least why Russia hoped it would be, and how blinding these systems is literally opening the gates for those deep strikes on energy infrastructure we keep seeing.
And we also need to connect this to the tactical reality on the ground. Because while everyone is watching the big strategic radars burn, there was a simultaneous strike on drone command posts in Zaporizhia and Kherson. It's a synchronized blinding of the bear from the space watching level right down to the trench level.
It's a war on site. If you can't see, you can't fight. So let's get right into it. The giant falls. We have official confirmation from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. A precision strike near the occupied village of Limarivka. That's in the Luhansk region. The target was the 1L-119 Nebo-SVU.
And to really understand why this matters, we have to look past the price tag. I mean, yes, $100 million is a lot of money, even for a state budget. But the value of the Nebo-SVU, it isn't just in the copper and the chips. It's in the physics of what it does. This is not the kind of radar that tracks a commercial airliner or, checks your speed on the highway.
Right. I've done a bit of reading on this system, and it seems like it was built with one specific paranoia in mind, and that's Western stealth technology. My understanding is it operates in the VHF band. Very high frequency.
That is exactly right. It uses meter-length waves, and this is where the physics gets really interesting. Modern stealth aircraft, think the F-35 or the F-22, they're shaped very specifically. They have facets and coatings to deflect radar waves. But that shaping is optimized for shorter wavelengths like X-band or Ku-band, which are the frequencies used by, say, fire control radars on ships or missile batteries.
So it's a bit like a net, right? If you have a net with tiny holes, you can catch small fish. But stealth relies on the radar waves being small enough to be deflected. When you hit a stealth jet with a wave that is literally meters long, the size of its wing or its tail,
the stealth shaping stops working.
it just doesn't matter anymore.
Precisely. You get a phenomenon called resonance. The radio wave resonates with the airframe itself. So to a VHF radar, like the Nebo-SVU, that invisible stealth jet doesn't look like a bird or a bee. It looks like a barn door. It glows. That is why Russia invested so heavily in these systems. They were supposed to be their insurance policy against NATO air superiority.
But here's where the tech gets even more impressive, and why losing it hurts them so much. Old school VHF radars were clunky. They're these big rotating antennas that were slow and not very precise. The Nebo-SVU, though, this is an AESA system, right? An active electronically scanned array.
It is, and it's a massive technological leap for them. Instead of just a spinning dish, it has an array of hundreds of transmit and receive modules. It can steer the beam electronically in milliseconds. It can track ballistic missiles, aircraft, and drones all at the same time. We're talking about spotting a fighter jet at 380 kilometers and looking up to 100 kilometers in altitude.
So it's the eye of Sauron. It just sees everything. But here's the critical vulnerability that I think listeners really need to grasp. This radar doesn't shoot anything.
No.
It just looks.
Correct. But it is the brain of the air defense network. Russia relies on the Nebo-SVU to cue their shooters. An S-300 or an S-400 battery, it has its own radar, but those are like a flashlight compared to the Nebo's floodlight. If the Nebo sees a threat at 300 kilometers, it tells the S-400 exactly where to look.
And without that cue, what happens?
Without that cue, the S-400 battery is fighting blind. They have to either keep their own engagement radars on 24/7, which is basically screaming, "Here I am, please shoot me," to any anti-radiation missile in the area.
Which is a terrible idea.
Or they leave them off and just pray they spot the threat visually before it blows them up.
So by taking out this one unit in Lemarivka, Ukraine didn't just destroy a sensor. They effectively degraded the efficiency of every missile battery in a 400-kilometer radius.
Yeah.
They put blindfolds on the guys with the guns.
They blinded the entire sector. And we have to talk about replaceability. You mentioned the $100 million cost, but the real cost is time. You can't buy an ASA VHF radar at the local hardware store. These require high-grade semiconductors, specialized manufacturing, and highly trained crews.
And with sanctions still biting, getting those high-grade components is a nightmare for Moscow.
Yeah.
It's not like 1945 where you just pour more steel into a mold to make another tank. These are like artisan-crafted electronics.
Exactly. And the crews. The people operating these things are not conscripts from a village who got 2 weeks of training. These are specialists, engineers, career officers. When a strike like this happens, Russia loses institutional knowledge that takes years, maybe a decade, to replace.
Which transitions us perfectly to the strategy. This wasn't a lucky pot shot. The Security Service of Ukraine, the SBU, is calling this the corridor strategy. And the numbers they released are staggering. They claim their Alpha Group alone destroyed $4 billion worth of Russian air defense assets in 2025.
$4 billion. That is a GDP-level number for some small countries, and it speaks to a very deliberate operational design. Ukraine knows it cannot destroy every single radar Russia has. Russia is massive. They have thousands of kilometers of border to watch. So Ukraine isn't trying to tear down the entire wall.
They're just punching holes in it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think of it like a bank heist movie. You don't need to disable the alarm system for the entire city. You just need to loop the camera on the back door for 10 minutes. The corridor strategy is about clearing specific lanes of airspace.
And we are seeing this play out geographically. This strike was in the Luhansk region. But the reports also mention strikes on 2 radar sites in the Rostov region, specifically the South Navigation radar systems. That's not a coincidence.
Not at all. Luhansk and Rostov covered the southern approach. By hammering these specific nodes, Ukraine is creating what you could call a sensor deficit in the south. And this forces the Russian General Command into a terrible game of musical chairs.
The shell game.
Right.
If you lose your primary radar in Luhansk, what do?
You have 2 bad options. Option A, you pull a radar from somewhere else, maybe from the Finnish border or from the Far East or from around Moscow. But moving those massive systems takes weeks. It involves rail transport, setup, calibration, and while it's in transit, it's not working anywhere. Plus, you've now left St. Petersburg or Moscow vulnerable.
And option B.
Option B is you leave the gap open and you just hope Ukraine doesn't notice.
But of course, Ukraine created the gap. They definitely notice.
And this leads to what analysts are calling fragmented air defense. Instead of an integrated air defense system, an IAD, where all the radars talk to each other and form a seamless shield, Russia is ending up with these isolated islands of coverage.
It's Swiss cheese defense.
It is. And the space between the holes is where the danger lives. This is a battle of attrition against high-tech sensors, and right now the sensors are losing. Russia simply cannot produce these AESA radars fast enough to match the rate of destruction.
And the proof that these corridors are working isn't just in the radar debris. It's in what's burning inside Russia. I want to talk about the refineries. This connects directly. Why does blinding a radar in occupied Luhansk matter to an oil executive in Krasnodar?
It matters because of the flight path. Let's look at the Slavyansk-na-Kubani oil refinery in Krasnodar Krai. It was hit on January 26, 2026, just days before this Nebo-SVU confirmation. But the campaign to blind that sector has been ongoing for a while.
I saw the footage from that strike. The fires were visible for miles. Russia claimed, as they always do, that they shot down the drones and it was just falling debris.
Yes, the famous falling debris that somehow manages to consistently fall exactly into the distillation towers.
Funny how that works.
Look, this facility processes 5.2 million tons of oil annually. That is a massive revenue stream. The fact that slow-moving Ukrainian drones could reach it proves the corridor exists.
That's the key link. These long-range suicide drones Ukraine is using, they aren't hypersonic missiles. They're basically mopeds with wings. They fly low and slow.
And that makes them tricky. On a standard Doppler radar, a slow-moving object at treetop level often gets filtered out as ground clutter. Trees swaying, a flock of birds, a truck on a highway. To spot them reliably at 300 or 500 kilometers out, you need those high-powered surveillance radars like the Nebo-SVU or the Nebo-M. You need the big eye to vector in the defenses.
But if the big eye has been turned into scrap metal by an ATAS CMS or a storm shadow,
Then the drone just ghosts right through. It flies 500 kilometers through the gap you created. By the time the local defenses at the refinery, maybe a guy with a shoulder-fired missile or a short-range Pantsir system, by the time they see the drone, it's already in its terminal dive. It's too late.
So the economic impact is a direct result of the radar war. It's a double blow to the Kremlin. First, you have to pay to replace a $100 million radar. Then you lose millions of dollars a day because your refinery is on fire.
It is strategic exhaustion. It forces Russia to ask, what do we protect? If they move air defense back to protect the oil money, the front line in Ukraine gets weaker. If they keep the air defense on the front line to protect the troops, the economy burns.
And based on the smoke rising over Krasnodar, it seems they're prioritizing the military front, leaving the economic rear vulnerable. But, and this is a big but, Ukraine isn't ignoring the front line either.
No, and that is what makes this report so comprehensive. While we're all looking at the strategic map, the General Staff report highlighted strikes on drone command posts in Solotka, Rivnopilya, Novohorivka, and Pidstepny. These are in the Zaporizhia and Kherson regions.
Now, when we say drone command post, we aren't talking about a massive bunker, right?
Right.
What does this actually look like on the ground?
Usually it's a basement, a fortified house, maybe a buried container. It's where the pilots sit. But the significance is huge. We know Russia uses these small infantry group tactics. They send wave after wave of small squads to probe the lines.
The meat assaults, as they're often called.
Right. But those squads are not autonomous. They are being guided by reconnaissance drones overhead. The commander back in the basement is watching a screen telling the squad leader, go left, go right, enemy machine gun ahead. And they're supported by FPV, first-person view, kamikaze drones that act as their mobile artillery.
So the command post is the brain of the assault. The infantry is just the muscle.
Exactly. By hitting these command posts in Zaporizhia and Kherson, and hitting that ammo depot in Vasilivka at the same time, Ukraine is severing the neural link. You take out the pilots and the antennas, and suddenly those Russian infantry squads are deaf and blind in the middle of a kill zone.
It effectively stops the assault before it even crosses no man's land.
It paralyzes them. And this is critical defensive context because we know heavy fighting is continuing near Pokrovsk. Russia has been massing armor and troops there, trying to push. Blinding their tactical drone hubs is the most effective way to slow down that creeping offensive.
It's really interesting to see the parallel there. Destroy the Nebo-SVU to blind the strategic generals, and destroy the drone hubs to blind the tactical lieutenants. It's the same philosophy, just applied at two different scales.
It's a multi-domain approach to warfare, and it shows that Ukraine is adapting faster than Russia is. Russia builds a bigger wall, Ukraine builds a better ladder. Or in this case, they just blow up the eyes of the guy guarding the wall.
So looking forward, what does this mean for the rest of 2026? We're only in January.
It means the Russian military is entering a period of extreme vulnerability. You cannot sustain a $4 billion loss rate in sensors. I don't care how big your stockpile was in 2022. These are finite resources. We are approaching a tipping point where the Russian integrated air defense system effectively ceases to be integrated.
It becomes a series of disconnected, frightened units hiding in the dark.
And that is when things get really dangerous for them. Because once the airspace is truly porous, Ukraine can strike logistics, hubs, command centers, airfields with near impunity. The corridor becomes a highway.
That is a terrifying thought for any Russian commander on the ground. We often talk about air superiority as having more jets. But maybe in 2026, air superiority is just about having the only working pair of eyes left on the battlefield.
That's a very accurate way to put it. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And right now, Ukraine is systematically poking out the bear's eyes.
Well, this has been a fascinating breakdown of what one explosion in the Luhansk field really means for the future of the war. It's not just a radar. It's the unraveling of an entire defense doctrine.
It certainly is, and it's a story we will be watching very closely as this corridor strategy continues to evolve.
Okay, summary time. The mission of this deep dive was to connect the dots between the destruction of that $100 million Nebo-SVU radar and the burning refineries deep inside Russia. We've seen how Ukraine is punching holes in the strategic shield and at the same time blinding the tactical drone operators on the front line. It's a coordinated, high-tech dismantling of Russian capabilities. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. We talked about the $4 billion hole in the Russian shield. If Russia continues to lose its high-tech sensors faster than it can train the crews or build the chips to replace them, at what point does their entire military structure just collapse under the weight of its own blindness? Can a modern army even function if it can't see past its own nose?
I think we are seeing the answer to that question in real time, and the answer is no.
You've been listening to Defense Report by Alex and Aria, where we analyze the latest in military strategy, global defense, and advanced weaponry. And one last time, please subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. We'll catch you next time.